Well, imposing Tier 4 restrictions would mean, of course, restaurants, gyms, hairdressers, different sorts of businesses and non-essential outlets having to close, just as they're gearing up for the busiest time of year. Stuart Patrick joins us now from Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Stuart, what do you think this would mean for businesses in Glasgow?
Well, as far as we understand it, will be just under 80,000 jobs will be back in suspension, if you like, in Glasgow City alone. So depending on how widely the geography is drawn for level 4, it could be substantially higher than that. And those will be 80,000 jobs that we'll be looking at with some concern into next year, because this is the time when companies build up their reserves to survive for the next year, particularly in the early part of next year when trade is much, much weaker. So it's real anxiety, I think, and a degree of disillusionment setting in, particularly with smaller companies across the city.
I mean, how do you think businesses will cope with this, given restrictions they've been under throughout the year already? You talk about early next year being a crucial period. If businesses can't make the profit they need in the run-up to Christmas, what happens come January?
Well, several businesses will close. I think this is one of the issues that's getting a little less coverage than perhaps it still deserves, which is the assumption that the job retention scheme keeps the businesses going. It does help. There's no doubt about that. And the small cash grants are also welcome, but they simply don't cover the regular costs that particularly smaller businesses have to try and find the cash for. So they don't cover rent. They don't cover insurances or employers' national insurance costs, contributions rather, or staff pensions, or equipment leases, or bank loan repayments, or loan interest. None of that is covered. And that has to come out of what are rapidly diminishing reserves for so many small businesses. In fact, I thought one of the best reports I've seen on this was done by the City UK from the financial services industry down in London, that estimated that just around 780,000 small companies were carrying about £35 billion worth of unsustainable loans. And that was just at the beginning of the summer that they were making those estimates after one lockdown. What it'll look like after a second round of lockdowns is at this stage hard to say, but it doesn't look positive.
Yeah, what sort of impact does it have on smaller businesses, suppliers that we don't talk much about, because it's not just the shop, the restaurant that we see as consumers being hit here, is it?
No, indeed. That has been one of the problems throughout. Quite often there are support packages put in place for particular sectors, and it's been difficult to be able to put the same support in for suppliers, because you don't know whether a food company is supplying restaurants or whether it's supplying supermarkets. It's much more difficult to put that kind of support in place. But it's becoming increasingly critical that we do have that kind of support in place, so that a business that has to shut, even if it hasn't been instructed to shut, should get a level of support as well.
And how concerned are you? Are you concerned about when and how we'd come back out of tougher restrictions again, if it is quite close to Christmas, and how you would manage that from a restriction point of view?
Well, I was particularly concerned when you saw that the 61 High Street chief executives saying that if the lockdown in England doesn't come to a close on the 2nd of December, that they will risk losing the peak Christmas period completely, and that consequently many stores won't reopen. Well, the same thought is particularly strong in Glasgow, because we're obviously going down into this lockdown later, 2 weeks later, than has been the case in England. So, yeah, the challenge again with business support is that what we saw over the summer was that it took a lot longer for business to recover customers. A lot of customers are very anxious, aren't coming out, and so the businesses are taking an awful lot longer to build up their trade again. So when the business support measures run out, they're quite often facing the cliff and having no alternative but to either mothball their businesses or to consider completely closing them.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us this afternoon.